The last time that I fished the reservoir that I'm taking you today, all I remember is that I caught absolutely nothing. That time was 8 or 9 years ago, and I recently found myself near this reservoir again, and I was excited for the opportunity to go fishing at a place that I hadn't been in a long time. However, as I went to the parking lot, there were signs there that said the parking lot was closed due to illegal dumping and vandalism. My expectations were already a little bit low about coming here, not just because of my last experience, but also because reviews that I saw online said that the fishing wasn't very good and that the environment around the pond was trashy and not great. It was also really busy, but I managed to find a small open area near the inlet. And the pattern that I'm using here is a bunny leech. And that was due mostly to hearing some other fishermen that were leaving saying that they had caught several fish on bait fish patterns earlier in the day. I got into my first fish pretty quickly. It ended up being a pretty nice rainbow trout. However, before I could bring him all the way in, he spit the hook. The fishing after that got a little bit slow. However, the number of people that kept showing up to fish around the reservoir increased. And so I found the space that I was fishing in getting smaller and smaller. So I started to move down just a little bit. In addition, I also threw on a second nymph under the bunny leech, but eventually lost both those flies to a snag near the rocks right out in front of me. After losing those flies, I ended up switching over to a dry dropper setup. I switched over to that setup because I started to see some fish rising just ahead of me. And the flies that I chose were on top an elk hair caddis, and then below that a Herl nymph. Shortly after switching to this dry dropper setup, I caught my second fish of the day on that Herl nymph pattern. And after releasing him, I took a minute just to make sure that he was good and waited for him to swim off. Soon after, I ended up snagging the line and the flies and lost both of those. After that, I decided to check out the creek that ran along the reservoir to see if it was worth fishing. And while there was nobody there, and the wildlife that I did see was wonderful, I was a little concerned because there were quite a few homeless camps along the creek. And so I decided to go ahead and fish the opposite side of the reservoir that I hadn't been on. At that point, there was no one else over there. To wrap up the day, I wanted to switch back to a bunny leech pattern that had been so successful earlier on. Unfortunately, I didn't have another one of those in my fly bin. And so I chose an orange scud pattern. The funniest part of the day for me, though, is when two fishermen showed up nearby and they argued over whose spot it was that they were at. One guy said, "I got here first," and the other guy said, "Well, you saw me looking over here, so you knew that this was my spot." After a while, they went away. I stuck around for a little longer and ended up catching my third fish of the day. As I was leaving, I took a minute to marvel at the snow-capped peak of America's mountain. It was a beautiful way to end a beautiful day.